I think if we had to translate the word toxic into another word, I think the simple term is danger. This is dangerous. And if possible, you should avoid consuming what you are surrounding yourself with. I'm using the example of chemistry. I mean, they tell you don't sniff this chemical or boom, you're going to pass out. It may even kill you. Don't drink it or, don't do anything stupid with a toxic chemical. But I think the purpose of what I'm trying to say here is a toxic relationship is something that is dangerous. It should probably be avoided. But I think that's the problem today is we don't really know how to avoid being in a toxic relationship. Welcome to the Free and Redeem podcast. I am your host, Simon Andrade. And here on this specific show, we tackle over key topics that every single Christian struggles with. We bring in guests, we bring in godly wisdom, and more importantly, we bring in scriptures in the Bible to help you enhance your walk with God, bring in confidence, and put you into the direction of freedom and grace by the power of the Holy Spirit. If you're new to this platform, I encourage you to subscribe. With all that being said, guys, let's get started with today's episode. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Free and Redeem podcast. I'm very excited about today's episode. Today, we are going to talk about 5 toxic Christian relationships that you should avoid. But before we get into that, if you're new to this channel, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe. We're posting content, my gosh, every other week, guys. And man, I cannot believe how fast this year has been going. But today's episode, it's something that I put a lot of thought into leading up into what we're going to talk about today. And why am I going to talk about 5 toxic, and I'm using that keyword pretty big here, Christian relationships that we should avoid? Well, what inspired me to do this episode is, first of all, we've been covering a lot about the topic of dating this whole entire year. But overall, dating is just an example of what we face in just about our everyday life, and that is the relationships we involve ourselves in. And this being a Christian podcast, it's something that I've been thinking about because I feel like in a way Christianity is something that is often stereotyped when it comes to a person who puts on the title of a Christian, the title of just about any type of way a Christian can be. And I feel like Christianity, a lot of times when someone is very bold about their faith or emphasizes their faith in Christianity or belief, a lot of times I feel like it's stereotyped as, hey, this is probably a perfect person, a person maybe we should consider a lot of our time, effort, and really just find a lot of fulfillment in at the end of the day. And I'm here to talk about in today's episode that may not be the case. Now, of course, with this being a Christian podcast, I'm not saying that we shouldn't trust Christians. I'm not saying we should completely avoid people who are claiming to be Christian. Heck, this is a Christian podcast that I have been covering for 3 years now. And by the way, I hope you like the shirt. This is a new shirt that I got from my church. Shout out to Westover Hills. Got this on the night of worship they had last month. So really comfortable and I love it. But enough of that. These 5 examples that I'm going to talk about, I feel like are common examples a lot of people get themselves into, rather if it's 2 people who are claiming to be Christian and they just somehow get into a toxic situation, or if it's one person who is Christian and the other person is not. Deep down, these are relationships that everybody should consider avoiding if they find themselves involved in this situation. Another thing too, since we've been talking about dating for quite some time, some of you may be thinking, hey, I'm just talking about a dating type of relationship, and I'm actually also here to confirm that this is not the case at all. This also applies to any kind of relationship you may involve yourself with. This could be a friend from school, a best friend, somebody you've been friends with for a long time, or this could even be a relationship with a family member who's a Christian, or a leader. And yes, this does even involve your pastor or a spiritual mentor per se. If you find yourself involved in a toxic relationship, the purpose of this episode today is to hope that you really understand and realize that, hey, this is something that we shouldn't really consume a lot of our time and effort or energy in, for that matter. I hope this episode is really helpful for you, but really getting into today's episode, what creates a toxic relationship? Well, first of all, we have to understand, what does it mean? What does the word toxic mean? I really just think of that example, or a simple analogy I could really come up with here is, I think about me being in a lab, a chemistry lab. For those of you, I'm sure a lot of us have been inside of a lab where you have to do a lot of chemistry lab work, which does involve a lot of toxic chemicals. Now, toxic, I just think of that simple triangle that's, let's say, on a glass speaker or something, and it says toxic, beware. Make sure to wear your mask, or make sure to wear goggles. And it's simply it's almost like a warning statement. But I think if we had to translate the word toxic into another word, I think the simple term is danger. This is dangerous. And if possible, you should avoid consuming what you are surrounding yourself with. I'm using the example of chemistry. I mean, they tell you don't sniff this chemical or boom, you're going to pass out. It may even kill you. Don't drink it, or, don't do anything stupid with a toxic chemical. But I think the purpose of what I'm trying to say here is, a toxic relationship is something that is dangerous. It should probably be avoided. But I think that's the problem today, is we don't really know how to avoid being in a toxic relationship. What creates a toxic relationship? Well, first of all, we have to understand one thing, and I'm using one simple number in this situation. In a toxic relationship is what creates it. It's when two people lack accountability from one another. Two people lack recognizing their flaws, their selfishness, or anything about themselves that they should probably work on. And instead, they have to blame it on another person, or they put that burden on another person to fix it for them. Another one, and this is a really big one, is when two people look at a relationship in a very unhealthy way. We all have relationships in many different ways. As I said, this episode is honestly for any kind of relationship. But I think of the relationships that we're naturally born with. We're naturally born with parents, or we're naturally born with parental figures. Sometimes we're born with siblings, or we have friendships, and then eventually we get involved in a romantic relationship to a marriage. And at the end of the day, as much as we can say these are blessings, and it really helps us know that we're not alone in this world, and we were meant to be loved and express love to others, a lot of times it's not perfect. So here are 5 common examples that I can give of toxic relationships that you should avoid if you are a Christian. The first toxic relationship you should avoid is what I like to call a compromised relationship. What does it mean to compromise a relationship? Well, the simple definition of compromise, according to dictionary.com, is something that is wrong or degrading to certain principles. Simple definition, but I think as a common definition I can give in my own words is, compromise basically means you put down your values, you put aside your beliefs, your principles, or anything you find valuable about your life. You'll put that aside for something that pleases somebody else. Or overall, it's like, you know that this is something you don't want to involve yourself in. You know it's something you won't take back for anybody. But when it involves a relationship, maybe you'll make a suggestion. And I think this is a common type of toxic relationship I think a lot of Christians find themselves involved in various ways. I think a very common one, or very common example, I'm sure a lot of Christians could really identify here, is the belief of not having sex before marriage, waiting to have sex until you are married. A lot of times we focus so much of our attraction or our infatuation that we have with somebody, and we'll compromise our beliefs, we'll compromise our standards just to kind of fix that, or just to kind of fulfill what we seek in the moment in a relationship. And whether people realize it or not, a compromised relationship, it's basically a simple thing. It's a lack of true accountability between two people, and two people who know that there is a standard they should really set. They know that a healthy relationship does involve boundaries. Instead, it's like, hey, forget it. We don't have boundaries. We don't have standards. You know what? We should just focus on the benefits of the relationship and avoid what it actually takes to, have a healthy relationship. That's basically what you can say compromise really is. Good example I could really give. I mean, there's so many other examples we can come up with. I mean, it's two people that believe, hey, it's okay to get a house, move in together, get an apartment. We're actually not going to have a wedding. We're not going to get married by the courts, or we're not actually verbally going to look at each other, have vows before each other and say, I do. and anything like that. It's like, no, we're just going to skip that part and get right into the big stuff, or stuff that seems good in the moment. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is, at the end of the day, there are consequences with compromise. An analogy I really was thinking about with this example, or this first relationship. When you compromise for something, I don't think we realize what it could really do in the long run. Imagine this. I mean, compromise in so many words, it's like this. Think of it going to an ice cream parlor. I think there's many ways we can get samples, but I always think of, let's say you go into a Baskin Robbins or a Marble Slab or something like that. You always see those tubs of ice cream, different flavors, and you ask for a sample. Hey, could I get a sample of this? And usually they give you a little taste of, what the flavor is like. Think of it this way. Imagine if you ask for a sample, instead of actually just getting a sample, you actually grab the whole entire tub. You grab the whole entire tub, and then you help yourself. Instead of actually getting a scoop of ice cream, or you try to go for the whole entire tub of ice cream and eat it yourself. And that's something I can think about when it comes to a compromised dating relationship, is somebody who just kind of dives into something that's really huge, but yet they don't think about the long-term consequences. Now, the analogy of the ice cream, if you're eating a whole tub of ice cream, what happens? A lot of times you're going to get full. You're going to get tired of that flavor. That is the issue today of why I think a lot of compromised relationships honestly don't last, because it's the focus. Oh, I'm kind of getting tired of this. You're not the person I thought you were. By the time, if let's say they move in, they join bank accounts, they do all these big commitments, and they kind of avoid the accountability side of it. And by the time they, let's say, actually do decide to make a commitment, what happens? Boom. You're not the person I thought you were. You know what? Now things are getting worse. And you know what? There's constant arguing. There's, it's just like toxicity. It comes in, and people just don't really understand the long-term impact that this could really bring. Another thing too is compromise. It's just like, when I use the example, compromise, it's like you compromise to either make yourself happy, or you put aside your standards to make somebody else happy. A lot of times in Christian relationships, I've seen people, they'll actually compromise the idea of scripture. They'll compromise the idea of what the Bible really says on various subjects, so they could obey another person. I mean, I even think of this one time at a ministry that I once knew. There was this one statement saying, yeah, the Bible talks about to honor your father and mother, but if you have to rebel against your parents to obey us, to submit to us, then God will honor that. And when I heard that, I was like, that is not okay. You're telling somebody else to disobey or disrespect your parents so they could submit to you. I mean, that's completely toxic. It's not healthy at all. But this is something that I've really thought about when it comes to people that compromise in a relationship. It's the lack of accountability, and how that really impacts people in the long run. But the second relationship that I want to talk about here is the topic of I like to call this the on and off relationship. An on and off relationship, I mean, it's basically, what makes a relationship toxic, honestly, is when two people make their relationship an addiction instead of a purpose. What does it mean to have an addiction? Let's say, in this case, an unhealthy addiction. The simple definition of having an addiction is something that is not right for you. You know that there are treacherous results. You know that at the end of the day, this is affecting you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But yet you go back to it time and time and time again, because all your mind thinks about is how it makes you feel in the long run, how it once made you feel. So you're going back to it because you believe that there's something still there that can give you that temporary pleasure, that temporary fix. And that is honestly the destructive side of a relationship. I would actually say probably the most common relationship I've seen a lot of young Christians get involved with is somebody they get romantically involved with. They become boyfriend and girlfriend, and they get involved in a situation where they found this strong emotional high with one another, this strong, overwhelming infatuation between one another. And then things go south, something really tough happens in the relationship. So what happens? They break up, they find themselves getting back together. They break up, and then they find themselves getting back together. This is something that a lot of Christians need to understand is not healthy if you are finding yourself in this situation, is when you are constantly on and off with somebody you're romantically involved with. And why is that? Well, because first of all, if you truly love somebody, you will learn how to make the relationship into a purpose. It may not be perfect, but at the end of the day, you guys are still sticking by each other. You guys are still figuring this out, and you're holding each other accountable to that relationship. That's one thing we got to understand too. If a couple's arguing, that doesn't mean the relationship is toxic necessarily. Every couple argues. We all get that. But when it comes to a couple that's constantly getting involved in a situation where they're like, man, screw this, screw you, I'm cutting you off, I'm blocking you on social media, but it's like they're talking again. And, friends and family are overwhelmed, all this stuff. This is stuff that, as Christians, we got to understand we're so much better than that. A very common reason why this relationship occurs, that's a better way to say it, is simply because it's usually two young people that they decide to end up getting sexually involved very early in the relationship, or just way before, as I mentioned earlier, way before they decide to get married. Why is it that most Christians, why do we teach that, hey, fornication is something we should really avoid and really not, just completely stay away from if we're in a dating relationship or a serious relationship with someone? The first thing we have to understand is sex is powerful. There is a powerful psychological, emotional, and you could even say spiritual. This is stuff that could really impact a lot of people in so many different ways. The neurological side of sex, it's just like our brain is automatically wiring itself to be attached to somebody. It's just like once we have sex, it's like it's such a powerful, memorable experience. And when you are so romantically head over heels for somebody and you have sex with them, in a way, your soul is naturally going to be drawn to them. A lot of times this is what us as Christians call a soul tie. And when people do it before marriage, in so many words, it's like this is something that they will experience, whether if they want to believe it or not. There's no such thing as a no strings attached relationship for somebody who has sex with another person. Naturally, if you have a sexual relationship with somebody, I can almost promise you, you're going to be thinking about them. You're going to be so consumed by them right after this occurs. And I've seen it happen time and time again for various couples, even someone like myself. And this is something that, guys, this isn't healthy. And this is something that we have to really consider. And I even think of the scripture that Paul gives in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16, where he says, I want to let you know that a man who sleeps with a prostitute, he does not realize that he becomes one flesh with her. One flesh means when two people have sex, they will be attached. When they separate, when you separate a married couple, let's say a married couple that's been married for so many years, if one person passes away, I'm thinking of a couple that grows old together, what happens? They start to mourn, they start to grieve that other individual. But this is something that we got to understand. It's unbelievably overwhelming for a lot of people, and it's not worth sticking around if you're always off and on with another individual. But moving on into number 3, another good example I can give of a toxic Christian relationship is, I call this the possessive relationship. This is a relationship where somebody views another person more as like their property or their possession versus just an individual that they can learn how to love and show love to. Instead, it's like, no, this is somebody that they belong to me and I decide how their life goes. In so many words, this is a relationship where it's like control is the main focus. It's, this is something that is, I've seen this happen a lot of times, but when a person's always kind of on your back, breathing down your neck, hey, what are you doing? They're constantly texting you. There's a lack of trust and security there. That is not healthy at all. And it's something that people need to understand. It's not okay for somebody to treat another person like they're their possession. And here's the thing. You could say, hey, yeah, I'm legally married to them, therefore they belong to me. You have to learn that with a relationship, there has to come trust. And trust has to build over time. And insecurity, let me tell you, I think is the primary focus on this type of relationship, where it's the other person, the person who's more possessive, doesn't really fully believe that they deserve this person. But it's that obsession of the other person, like, man, I just want this relationship. I'm talking about it from a dating perspective. This could even be at your church. If you have leaders, if you have pastors that are always on your back, treating you like if you're a prisoner, instead of like just a member of the church, a person that is, a person that they should be blessing, a person they should be speaking life over, instead of like, hanging on to a chain with them. It's like, that's other examples you have to consider. But number 4, I like to refer to this relationship, moving on to the 4th point. This could also be identified as the fear-based relationship. A fear-based relationship, this relationship is very dangerous because there are some people that may not realize that they're in a toxic relationship sometimes I do believe that there are people that do realize that they are in a toxic relationship. But I think what makes this specific relationship troublesome is when a person decides they don't want to leave it. And the main reason why they don't want to leave it is the simple word fear. It could be their own individual thinking. If I leave this person, I'm going to be lonely. If I leave this person, how am I going to live my life? How am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to, just overcome this? It's the fear of loneliness. It's also the fear of change. A lot of times people know they have to make a big change in their life. So what happens? They fear change. The fear of failure. What if I don't go in the right direction if I leave this relationship? A fear-based relationship could also be, a couple or somebody that basically speaks something very discouraging over another person. If you leave me, you're never going to find somebody like me. You're going to be a failure. If you leave, you're going to be in a more toxic relationship than mine. So I'm the only person that you have. And I've even seen this in some other, you could say church relationships or relationships where people will be even as toxic enough to say, if you leave this church, you're never going to spiritually grow. If you cut me off, you're never going, God's going to hate you. He's not going to love you no more. He's going to forsake you. This is stuff that people are just finding themselves involved with. And I'm here to tell you, don't let fear prevent you from making a real breakthrough. Sometimes I think the first step we have to make if we want to get out of a toxic relationship is understand it just takes the first step of breaking free and allowing God to do the rest in your life. I think that's one of the main problems that we find ourselves involved with today in Christian relationships. We become dependent on them as if they are God. But we have to understand the human nature of people versus the human nature of the Lord is people are not transactional. God is so much more than that. God is more than just a transactional God. He is a God that is willing to sit with you and willing to help you grow with you instead of fully depending on you the way people depend on us, or vice versa, how we depend on people. This is the first step we have to consider. But moving on into the last point, I like to refer to this relationship. I know this is a very cliche thing to say, but I refer to this as the abusive relationship. What does it mean to be in an abusive relationship? I think the simple term we have to use here is abuse is a term where someone uses discipline. I'm using that term discipline in quotation marks because it's like they use discipline towards another individual to unleash their own inner pain, their own inner demons, their own inner skeletons in the closet, their own inner dark space on other individuals. But they'll disguise it as this is something that the other individual needs. And I have actually seen this on a lot of toxic churches, toxic church environments, toxic dating relationships, and toxic marriages. Is when basically all the characteristics I've named here, compromise, possessive, people that are constantly on and off, and, fear. This is what abusive relationships honestly look like. And a lot of times I don't think people fully recognize abuse because a lot of times they look at abuse as, hey, maybe this is something I need. Maybe this is how my life is supposed to be. And if you're in an abusive relationship, you have to understand one thing. There's a difference between discipline and there is a huge difference between abuse. Abuse is where you get something that maybe you really didn't need, but you were kind of manipulated or you were kind of pushed into a place where, hey, this is what you deserve. It could even retaliate to physical abuse, sexual abuse, or, just any kind of relationship you may be involved with. You have to recognize that abuse is a toxic relationship. This is something we have to avoid. A lot of times today, abuse is disguised as love. Oh, I'm doing this because I love you. I'm disciplining you because I love you. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't be doing this. I'm here to tell you that's not the case. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any discipline in any kind of relationship. But here's the thing. Discipline involves, hey, this is the result, but you continue to get better. This person continues to walk with you despite where you end up going in your life. But abuse, it's just like, boom, it's constant hammer, hammer, hammer. Going after a person, even when they may not really fully deserve it. And abuse, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 1 all the way, pretty much that whole chapter, it really debunks the idea of what abuse could be disguised as. We all know the scripture, love is patient, love is kind, it does not boast. But guys, this is something that we have to understand. And the question a lot of people may ask is, why do people get involved in toxic relationships? Well, the simple answer to that is, we don't know what we're getting involved with. A lot of times today, we don't understand the people that we are surrounding ourselves with. Sometimes we don't know what to expect. But I think if we stick together, if we hold each other accountable, and if we can be around the people that actually do care about us and do want to see us, spiritually recover, spiritually grow, because that's honestly, at the end of the day, what the church was created for, is two people, just the people growing together, loving one another, instead of bringing one another down. If you're in an environment, a church environment, or if you're in a romantic relationship where you just feel like you're constantly being brought down, this is something that you have to make the first step of getting out of. And my prayer for you is that you find the right support system. You involve yourself with Christians or believers, true believers, who are willing to be there for you, pray with you, and help you overcome the toxicity that you may have been involved with. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. What do you think in the comments? Are there other examples that we could give? What are other toxic relationships? Once again, let me know in the comments. But with all that being said, guys, thank you and God bless.